now it's time for our keynote speaker, Dr. Omar El Arini. He is the Honorary Chief Officer of the Secretariat of the UN Multilateral Fund. He was the first Chief Officer and a lifelong Honorary Chief Officer, and still is, of the Multilateral Fund. He's the recipient of several international awards in the field of the environment. As World Bank consultant, Mr. El Arini assisted the Global Environment Facility in setting up the Adaptation Fund of the Kyoto Protocol. He's member of the UNFCCC Transitional Committee for the design of the Green Climate Fund in 2011, as well as a member of the board of the GCF from 2012 until 2018. He's also a member of the board of directors of the Geneva-based South Center. He obtained his Bachelor of Science from Ain Shams University, Egypt, a Master of Science from the University of Missouri, USA, and a PhD from Imperial College of Science and Technology Medicine, UK. So your education is international, Dr. Omar. I mean, you're everywhere. He has held research positions in Egypt, Germany, and the Netherlands, and a very long CV. We're very proud to have you. You seem to be everybody's mentor on the climate issue, so we are really, really lucky to have you. And please, I invite you to speak either from your place or from here. It's up to you. Okay, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ablatif. Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I find it extremely difficult always to speak after His Excellency Ambassador Abul Mayt. He said it all about the challenges that we'll be facing, not only Egypt or Africa, but the international community. I will not speak on climate finance because there is no definition, there is no agreement on what constitutes climate finance, believe it or not. 30 years on, the world cannot agree to define what's climate finance. Hence, Ambassador Meg said that the commitment of the developed country to mobilize $100 billion per year. Now you have figures from OECD that tell you we're nearly there. Developing countries are challenging this because we cannot agree on metrics to measure how much money actually was paid. Luckily for me, I'm in retirement supposedly, so I don't represent any government. And because of my background, I wish to share with you some optimism based on my experience dealing with two regimes, the ozone regime and the climate regime. Both regimes based on science, first basic science, then experimental science. At the beginning, there was an element of uncertainty, but the danger of inaction was so huge that the world had to take action early on. One succeeded, and the other is still trying to find its way to success. So I come from this culture of success even within the multilateral system, a multilateral system that developed from bipolar world during the Cold War to a multipolar world with the eminence of China and India, Brazil, other so-called emerging economies of the world stage. But we are feeling the effects of the impacts of climate change, and we feel, all of us collectively as human beings, we are not doing enough. 2022, this year, marks several important occasions. The first, it's 30 years since the agreeing and signing the Rio agreements, including the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It is the 50th anniversary for the establishment of the United Nations Environment Program that started all of this, all that brings us together here. and for years to come was started by UNEP and to a certain extent by the World Meteorological Organization. At the time, the 50 years ago, just a few years after that, two prominent Africans led UNEP, the late Professor Mustafa Tolba of Egypt, and the other led the World Meteorological Organization, the late Professor Obasi of Nigeria, and they produced the Montreal Protocol and the UNFCCC, in addition to the biodiversity and the combat of desertification conventions. Two very prominent Africans led this effort. And also, 2022 marks the 35th anniversary of the Montreal Protocol. So what is the relationship between all these things? I'm trying to shift a little bit from the 2% of the GDP is needed to achieve protection from the impacts of climate change to the $100 billion that the developed country promised that Ambassador Abul Magd referred to. You find figures all over the place. And we all feel that there isn't enough action. And we are seeing the impact of climate change. In our lifetime, we've seen 30% of the arable land in Pakistan under floods, loss of cotton crop, 30 million people are in this array, and we're going to see more and more of these in the immediate future. I said a few minutes ago that there is an element of optimism based on reality. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the ozone hole and the ozone layer. The ozone layer is very thin layer of gas called ozone. It's O3, 3 atoms of oxygen in the stratosphere, stretching between 15 and 50 kilometers into the stratosphere. And without it, there will be no life on Earth. It was discovered in the 70s that a hole existed over Antarctica, and therefore the ultraviolet light could penetrate and come to the Earth's surface and literally destroy life on Earth. The world acted very fast based on science, and a protocol was agreed in 1987 called the Montreal Protocol that had a system, had a regime of removing all substances, all chemicals that can destroy the ozone layer. And these chemicals, they were inert, they were not toxic, and they were in all kinds of industries, from refrigeration to foam to meter dose inhalers for asthma, solvents, firefighting medium in aeroplanes and in rockets. Everything was used everywhere, and everywhere in the world and in these industries. And the developed countries had to get out of all of this, stop the production and consumption of all these chemicals within 10 years. And developing countries were given a grace period of 10 years to grow. Ambassador Magd was talking about the development space for developing countries, common but differentiated responsibilities. Now, all the world, almost 200 countries, are in full compliance with the Montreal Protocol control measures, and the ozone layer is in its way to recover. Some developed countries saw a niche of hope in the ozone regime to save climate. So there is a group of chemicals that is used to replace the ozone depleting chemicals, but they have very potent global warming potential, almost 13,000, the global warming potential of carbon dioxide. They struggled and brought this under the Montreal Protocol, And the Montreal Protocol was amended in Kigali, the Kigali Amendment, to phase down the production and use of this chemical, commonly known as freons. And in 2047, it is expected that this chemical will be totally removed from production and consumption, and will contribute to that it will reduce the global warming by between 0.4 and 0.5 degree Celsius. This is fantastic promise, especially in light of the fact that now we are accepting begrudgingly that we cannot fulfill the 1.5 degrees Celsius, that it was one of the aspirational goals of the Paris Agreement, and perhaps we'll have to settle for the 2 degrees and work very hard to achieve this. Now, why the ozone regime was very successful, money was made available and was made on grant basis, and it paid for the incremental costs for conversion of existing industries already, not something to be constructed in the future. There was absolute equity between developed and developing countries. The governance was such that this equal representation led to very serious negotiations, reaching decisions that can be implemented. Ambassador Mack can tell you, after all the hours and the hard negotiations under the climate regime, we have all these hundreds of decisions that they devote to a lower body, like the board of the Green Climate Fund, that you have to renegotiate these decisions again, reach another consensus, and then give it to people who are actually on the field to implement, and they find it extremely difficult to implement this decision. Ambassador Mack said that this is a cup of implementation. But if you take decisions, then please allow me to be able to implement such decisions. We have several hurdles here. Decisions are taken by consensus because there is no voting mechanism under the climate regime. And everybody has to have their thing in the decision. Then it comes to a lower body to implement these decisions, so other decisions will come out of this, also based in consensus, and goes to implementing agencies. For example, in CIB, if it were an implementing agency of one of these financial mechanisms, they have their own modus operandi, they have their own procedure, their own charter. So it is subjected to several dilution difficulties, and this takes time when we really have no time. We really have no time to wait until everybody gets their act together. So what the success of the Montreal Protocol and the stumbling blocks in the implementation of the UNFCCC tell us that governments, especially in the developed world, the average emission of the per capita emission in the world of carbon dioxide is 4.7 tons. Africa is 0.8 tons. The US is 15 tons. China is half of that amount. So we see India is less than 2. Brazil is less than 5. So we see the imbalance in emissions here. So what needs to be done in order to learn from the lessons of the success of the Montreal Protocol and its financial mechanism and bring it into climate change. We almost did this in 1997 when the Kyoto Protocol was negotiated. The Kyoto Protocol was similar to the Montreal Protocol, by the way. It had the compliance system, freeze the emission at certain level at a certain year, and reduce, etc., flexible market mechanisms. And then the US said, no, China and India and Brazil are not with us on this, because there was differentiation, the common but differentiated responsibilities that Ambassador Abu Nag referred to. You know, China is growing very fast, India is growing very fast. They are just China is on the verge of surpassing us in their emission, etc. And the United States decided to walk out of this agreement. They did not, the Clinton administration did not even present it to the Senate for ratification. It is not enough to sign an international treaty. It has to be ratified by the legislature in the country. And the Americans said that, okay, we would need to have a new legally binding system, agreement, and perhaps protocols. And we'll need 5 years to negotiate this, and the 5 years yielded Paris. Paris does not have compliance measures. It's all aspirational. No compliance, so you can do whatever you want to do. You just tell us what you intend to do with your emission. And developing countries, please tell us also how much money you will need. And we say this is how much money we need, and say no, this is too much. We want the private sector to come in. Well, I'm glad we are guests of the CIB here, and they can tell us whether they can go to any country like this without having guarantees to start this investment. And by the way, when you talk about investment, when you talk about control measures, they have to apply, and here I'm talking about developing countries only, to 147 developing countries at the same time. If you want to save the planet, this effort has to be global in every sense of the word. Now, implementation, again, is extremely important. Does the World Bank, do the regional multilateral development banks, the 3 major ones, plus the 2 ones in Europe and the new one in China, can they reduce their bureaucratic procedure in order to move fast once they are given the money to invest in Africa or in Latin America or where the investment may be? We haven't seen such changes. I give you the experience from the Green Climate Fund. It takes years to develop a project and have it approved by the board. It takes longer time to make the first disbursement. And here I'm talking about international financial institutions like the World Bank and the MDBs. So we need a revolution in these institutions in order to hasten, to quicken the pace of implementation. Then I will not exonerate the developing countries of the responsibility. Developing countries are very slow in building up capacities, in sustaining such capacities. Millions of dollars were spent on building up capacities in developing countries, yet the majority of developing countries still in dire need to have foreign experts to develop their projects. Tell them this is good for you and this is not good for you. This will go with this agreement and this will not go with this agreement. And then you have the bureaucracy, and then it goes to the international bureaucracies in these funds. I want to close here because I don't really want to go in different areas by saying there is hope to save the planet from global warming if we have the will. And we'll only have the will if the leaders of the world can assume the moral high ground and really assume a role of leadership that is not based in hegemony, that's not based on greed, that's not based on subjugating nations for economic needs. Can we save the planet? Yes, we can save the planet from global warming. We need to change. There need to be a paradigm shift in the standard of living, the way of life of developed countries, their consumption pattern, etc. If they are not able to do this, then technology has to be applied immediately, and the technology is here. And the price of technology is getting cheaper and cheaper now. That can replace the technology that leads to all these hazards of global warming. We need a compliance regime that will limit emission of all greenhouse gases based on differentiation, the common but differentiated responsibility, the thing that was coined in Rio in 1992. And we need to take less decisions and implement of what we have. And we need to tell the private sector, we as developed countries, we will take all the risks to allow you to move into these emerging markets, these least developed countries, because they need help to help us to have a safer planet. And I will end here, and I'll thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omar, for an excellent presentation and overview of things past and present and challenges of the future in a very neat way. Okay, what you said is inspiring, and luckily we've been a bit inspired from before. So 2 of the sessions that are going to be here today are going to actually talk about the paradigm shift and how it is supposed to take place. And also we're going to have a roundtable discussion that's talking about the challenges today, because not only is there unfairness and issues of concern, but these issues of concern are becoming more challenging with the Ukraine war and with the energy crisis in the entire world, and there seems to be a bit of change of climate sentiment, let's say. All right, and so there is going to be a very nice session on that. But let me say a few words about something for which we're going to present the video after the break. It was supposed to be before the break, but for a technical issue, it's going to be after the break. Let me tell you something about 6 webinars that we have done from June until the 27th of September, to be very, very specific. We've had 6 webinars bringing out the voice of Africa on technical issues, brainstorming these issues, seeking solutions from inside Africa, and they were actually amazing and smashing success. We've had 4 speakers from Africa in each one, experts on the field. The first one was about climate finance. The second one was about small farmers and the effect of the climate change on them. The third one was about the carbon market. The fourth was about readiness for adaptation. The fifth was about early warning system for natural disasters. And the sixth was about African youth and how they look at things. And it's very interesting, the discussions, and the outcome of discussion is going to be spelled out, written in a neat way in like a 1-pager and given to you to help actually in the negotiations. But let me tell you some of the most interesting conclusions. One of the most strangest conclusion for me, as a matter of fact, was the one related to the carbon market. When we were talking about the carbon market, we thought, that we were talking about climate justice and that the carbon market is going to help with the climate justice. After all, there are countries with huge emissions, like the US, China. 20 countries all in all represent the full load of the emissions, and you have an entire continent, which is Africa, contributing no more than 3%, and yet paying a hefty price in drought, floods, hunger, you name it. All right. So we are talking, how can we achieve the climate justice with the carbon market? Turns out the carbon market has nothing to do with it. The carbon market is simply a commercial market where you can make huge profits. Yes, the improvement of technology is going to let you in the market and bring you revenue, but it has nothing to do with the climate justice. And this is something that has to go back to the negotiation table and be talked about. Article 6 does not talk about that at all, which means that the climate justice is not on the COP agenda. And this is a critical point. Another key point, when talking about finance, Africa wants to have self-finance. After all, they are always stuck with money that's coming from agencies. They go to the projects that they are interested in. They continue or not continue depending on the availability of the funds. They want to be able to self-finance. And they know that this is a long-term target, but they need to start working on it from now. They have initiatives at every level, at the community level, at border level between countries, good initiatives that can be scaled up, that need support and that are not visible, and that could provide solutions emerging from Africa and not the ones necessarily imposed by the Western world. Adaptation is not on the agenda again at all. Mitigation is the target. We have specific numerical quantitative targets for mitigation, but we don't have anything on adaptation. And if whatever it is that you don't have a target for, whatever that you cannot measure, you are not going to have a plan for it. And of course, there is very high awareness at the level of Africa that a big part of the problem is also on their side, because they need to have their national plans properly. They need to have capacity building. They need to be more ready for adaptation. So there were very interesting discussions in those webinars and interesting conclusions. And one of the most interesting was the very last one on the 27th about the youth. And it was interesting how they were attacking the entire system and saying, you are messing up big time. You're not solving the problem. You are making it worse. Listen to us. And don't let us talk in the young platforms only. Don't let us talk to each other. Bring us to the mainstream. Listen to what we are suggesting. Because we can, if we have your support, we can push our governments to be responsible for their acts. Whoever takes a decision, whoever starts something has to be accountable for it. And even if some of the governments are corrupt, we can work on that. They were so powerful in their messages, that would make us feel a bit ashamed that we are too slow or not fast enough in actually saving the planet like we should. I just thought I'd give you some of these brief messages. I don't think the video is ready yet. It's still being uploaded? Yes? Not yet. So we are going to have our coffee break now. But before the coffee break, I want very much to thank our incredible panelists for their great speeches. Omar Bek, Mohamed Bey Sultan, Safir, and Dr. Omar El Arini. I thank you all very much, and I invite you for a short coffee break, and then we're going to continue with the day. Thank you.